The Rebel Capitalist Show.
Chris, why are you so, why do you think the probability is high that we'll run into food shortages? And how do you invest around that? How are you doing that personally for your hedge fund?
Yeah, so there's two elements to this, right? One, I'll answer the last bit and then we'll go back to why I think there's going to be food shortages. You can profit from these things, right? And that's great. That's what my job has been, right? So for us, it's been fertilizer companies. They have the highest sort of profit margins within that space. They're far less easily coerced. So for example, if you've got a large farming chain, right? As we've seen, if you're non-essential, you're non-essential. And you might think, well, food's never going to be non-essential. Guess what happened in 2020, right? When they said that only supermarkets can remain open. And in the United States, it's roughly 30 to 35%, I think it is, of food that is consumed is not consumed via supermarkets. It's delis and hotels and restaurants and things of that nature. So you take 30, 40% of your food supply, that was deemed non-essential. And you might say, oh, well, it's a bunch of delis and stuff, and maybe 10% of them went away and didn't make it through, whatever. No, it goes deeper than that, because they were purchasing from farmers who did not have contracts with the supermarket chains. Okay. And those guys
They're bust.
They're bust. A lot of them are bust. And they were plowing their food back into the ground because they were non-essential. So think about the CapEx spending that they've just done in 2020 and 2021. I'll tell you what it looks like. Right. That's what it looks like. Because A, they didn't make a profit in 2020. And B, when they look forward, they go, what does the future look like? We don't know. There is so much uncertainty that their ability to go out and spend on increasing acreage or anything like that has been massively curtailed. And so
now it's even more centralized than it was before.
It's even more centralized than it ever was before, 100%. Right. So the food shortages are definitely coming. And then the other component behind it, of course, is energy, which comes into this ESG, woke, carbon neutral narrative. And so the costs in terms of energy have all been rising. You know, we just think about this. Going into the lockdowns, pre-lockdowns, the price of energy now is far higher than it was pre-lockdown.
Right.
But we just stopped the planet. We stopped as many planes flying around. We stopped cars driving around. So is that not destruction of demand? Yes, it is. So then you go, how is it possible that we have prices going up? Because while you're destroying demand by stopping productivity. And by stopping productivity, you're stopping supply.
Even faster.
So we've just been decimating supply. And the inflation that we've had to this point now is nothing like what's coming. There's a catch-up coming. So we're going to have inflation and we're going to have shortages in the foodstuffs. And I think what is likely to happen is we're going to have rationing. We're going to have emergency powers enacted because they'll say, oh, we've got a food crisis and it was because of the pandemic, and they'll make some bullshit stories up. But what they'll do is they'll exert more control over the economy and more control over our freedoms. You won't be free to choose meat, right? Because they'll say we're in a crisis. How dare you eat the most expensive of meats? No, you should just eat cabbage and lettuces and eat your porridge, you serf. And so that's, and so, you want to try and the only way that you get out of that is to have the tools that they're using to dismantle those. And so ultimately, I think that's going to happen by virtue of the fact that humans want to be free, and they will be forced to go about solving these problems because they'll go, damn it, I can't get enough food for my family at the supermarket and through these rations and everything else. and they'll get together with their neighbors, and you'll form new communities, and we will solve the problem. But it's not going to come without a lot of pain. Being a lazy guy like me, I'm like, I'd rather drop myself into an environment where that's already built, right? You know? And because the society structure also then doesn't have to go through so much turmoil, because when you go through these periods of turmoil, you're going to have rising crime, you're going to have murders, you're going to have suicides, like you have, and I hate to be the guy talking about these things because they're all bloody depressing, but that's just the reality if you look through historical periods. And so while that is taking place, you've got the World Economic Forum pushing all these narratives where they're saying you shouldn't eat meat, you've got to eat bugs. You shouldn't be driving your car. It emits, too much carbon. In fact, you shouldn't be breathing. I'm not sure you should actually be alive. I mean, maybe population control is better. What about a one-child policy? I mean, these sorts of things are actually, you've read the World Economic Forum stuff. I've read it extensively, that together with the IMF. And if you read through the IMF stuff, that's almost even more frightening. And there are those sorts of things that I've just mentioned get dropped in there, and they get glossed over with these feel-good terminology like sustainability and
equity,
but when you look through what they're actually saying, it's frightening. So the good news, because we need to end on some good news, is that it's failing. Communism always fails, and this one will fail too. And we can see by the increasing narratives that really don't make sense that they're getting much, much more desperate with ever more ridiculous statements. And the good thing with that is that even people who are for the vaccines or for the lockdowns are looking at it and going, hang on a second, that doesn't really make sense. Yeah. And so when that doubt creeps in, when you start losing trust, you go, well, if they're lying to me about that, what else might they be lying to me about? And so trust is being shattered. Now, when all frauds are predicated on two things, they're predicated on a lie and an ability to enforce the lie. And when your lie is exposed, all you're left with is an ability to enforce it. In other words, authoritarianism. So I think it's a guarantee that over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to see extraordinary amounts of authoritarianism in certain parts of the world, while at the same time, other parts of the world are going to go, hang on a second, this is too risky. Imagine, if you will, that you and I were running some country. We've got a populace that's really upset because we've locked them down and so on and so forth. And they're increasingly distrustful. Now we either really hammer them with police, military on the streets, water cannons, everything else, or we step back. And it becomes a binary thing, because if we go down the totalitarian route, we really put ourselves at risk, because we will never exit office safely. Right. You literally become a dictator, and then you've got to solidify your power and keep it forever. Mussolini. And it's not just the populace. Yeah, it's not just the populace that you got to worry about. It's all of those other lunatic psychopaths around you, because they all want your position too. Right? You've surrounded yourself with
ancient Rome. If you study ancient Rome, almost you just go through it, and every single guy that gets in power, within 90% of them, within 10 years, some dude kills him, or sometimes within 10 months, some dude kills him to take power. It's just over and over and over and over and over and over again, to the point where you're like, why on earth would you want to be in charge there? Yeah. Your life expectancy is like 6 months.
And that's the wonderful thing. So now you're a leader there, and you're faced with this reality, and you cross that Rubicon, and you're just now like a leader in Rome, and your lifespan is right. Or you step back and you do something else. And so over the next few years, we're going to see the whole world, I think, splitting into the step back and do something else, and into the ancient Rome. And that's going to give us a much clearer path into understanding what the world's going to look like in sort of 10 years time. And it's very difficult at this point of time to know exactly what that is likely to look like. Right. We're seeing signs of it already, and I've got my suspicions, and I've been writing about them extensively. But the truth is, we're going to have to really keep our eye on this thing like a hawk and watch it. And it will split. It will not work. And so that's what the next 10 years is going to look like, in my humble estimation. So it's going to be a bumpy ride. And certainly, I think, our world is macro. And I cannot think, if you were put to a test, if you said, okay, like you're a pro athlete, right? And you're going to design, a course for you think about, what's that? You guys have got the Ninja Warrior. What's it that, you seen that program? In the US, it's called a Ninja Warrior or something. And basically you've got these elite athletes, and they've got to get through this obstacle course, right? And it's, it's climbing ropes, and it's balancing on things, and it's just, it's a very, very difficult course.
Yeah, it's like that Japanese game, that extreme elimination challenge. That was awesome.
Yeah, that's exactly.
They knock those Japanese guys off the ropes, and they just bash their face. They hit them with bowling balls. Yeah. It's great.
Yep. That's it. And so, like, these are these sort of, it's like the Olympics of these CrossFit type, things. Anyways, when you go into the macro world, if we were to design a similar course where the best of the best are going to try and get through this thing, I think it's what we've got in front of us, to be honest. I bloody hope we can do a good job of it, but I mean, that's what it feels like.
Yeah, that's a good point.